Mira returned home after a long day at the tech lab. Her feet ached and her mind was still buzzing with the numbers, graphs, and small victories of the day. She had been waiting for this moment all day, to finally park in her reserved spot and take a moment to breathe. Her apartment building was busy, the streets full of cars, but her assigned parking space had always been a safe haven. She smiled, imagining the ease of sliding the car into the space and walking inside without the stress of searching for parking. As Mira turned the corner of the lot, her smile vanished. In her reserved spot stood a shining rented Lamborghini, its paint polished to a mirror finish. The car glimmered under the late afternoon sun, drawing attention from anyone who happened to glance into the lot. Mira froze for a moment, unsure whether she should feel angry or shocked. She knew instantly who it belonged to. Ben, the son of Dana, the HOA chair, had a reputation in the neighborhood. He was confident, spoiled, and often ignored the rules that applied to everyone else. Mira stepped out of her car, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. She stared at the Lamborghini, noting the way it was parked carelessly, taking up not only her space but a bit of the space next to it. Her heart thumped in frustration. She had spent months paying extra fees for the convenience of a guaranteed spot. This was not only unfair, it was disrespectful. "Excuse me," she called, walking toward the car. No one emerged. Mira looked around. Ben was nowhere to be seen. She knocked lightly on the car window, hoping for a polite encounter. The sleek black window reflected her determined face back at her. Still no one appeared. Mira sighed and pulled out her phone. She called the HOA office, hoping they would help. "Hello, this is Mira. My parking space is blocked again. It's number 14 by a rented Lamborghini. Could you please assist?" The voice on the other end was calm, almost robotic. "Ma'am, guest parking is available throughout the complex. We cannot control where guests park as long as they are within the guidelines. You are welcome to move your vehicle to another space for today." Mira felt a flush of anger rising. "This is my assigned spot. It is reserved. I pay extra for it every month. This is not guest parking." The voice hesitated for a moment. "I understand, ma'am, but as I said, guest parking is flexible. The board expects residents to be understanding. Please try to find an alternate spot for now." She ended the call, frustrated and feeling powerless. It was not just the inconvenience. It was the message. Privilege allowed Ben to take what he wanted without consequence. Mira's mind raced as she looked at the Lamborghini. It seemed like a challenge now. She clenched her fists. She would not allow this to continue quietly. Mira backed her car slowly and parked at the far end of the lot, where spaces were tight and often taken. She got out and looked at the Lamborghini again. The sun reflected off its surface, sparkling almost as if mocking her. She took out her phone and started taking photos. She knew documentation was important. If she wanted to solve the situation, she needed evidence. Photos of the car, the license plate, the way it blocked her space, and the time of day would all matter. While she worked, a few neighbors walked by. Some gave sympathetic nods. One elderly man, Mr. Collins, raised his eyebrows and whispered, "That boy thinks the rules don't apply to him." Mira nodded in agreement, showing him her photos. She could see the mix of frustration and admiration in his eyes. The neighborhood had seen this before. People who followed the rules often felt powerless against Ben's confidence and Dana's influence. Mira decided to wait. She took a seat on a nearby bench, letting her anger simmer into thought. There had to be a way to address this situation without breaking rules or acting out of impulse. She thought about her options. Complaining to the HOA had not worked. Asking Ben directly could be risky since he often ignored polite requests. Legal action felt extreme, and she wanted a solution that demonstrated fairness rather than punishment. As she watched, she noticed patterns. The Lamborghini came on weekends, always around the same time, and it left late in the evening. It did not matter if others needed spaces. This car had a claim to her spot in Ben's eyes. Mira realized that if she could gather enough proof of repeated abuse, she might be able to make a stronger case. She began to make a mental plan. Over the next few days, Mira observed quietly. She kept notes of when the car appeared, how it was parked, and whether Ben was present. She even noticed small details like how he would often leave shopping bags and personal items on the curb, adding to the inconvenience. The more she watched, the clearer it became. Ben believed the rules were optional. and Dana's position made him feel untouchable. Mira reached out to her friend Raul, a local mechanic who had a small workshop nearby. "Raul," she said over the phone, "I need your help. There is a problem with my parking space and a certain Lamborghini that keeps blocking it. I need to track this properly, gather evidence, and figure out how to solve it without breaking any laws." Raul was curious but supportive. "Mira, I know exactly what you mean. That boy has been showing off for months. We can get some cameras set up around the lot. Not illegal, just enough to show the truth." Mira smiled, feeling a spark of hope. She realized she did not have to face this alone. With Raul's technical skills, they could monitor the situation and collect irrefutable evidence. She started drafting a plan. Cameras and sensors could help document Ben's repeated disregard for rules. A digital record would carry more weight than complaints or verbal warnings. Mira also reached out to Talia, a neighbor who flew drones for small deliveries and photography projects. "Talia, I need you to help me keep an eye on a specific area in the parking lot," Mira explained. "It is important that we document when a certain car appears and how it is parked." "We want to gather proof for the HOA," Talia agreed. "Mira, I've seen this before. People in power often take advantage. We can make this transparent for everyone." "You are smart to act with evidence." Over the next week, Mira, Raul, and Talia worked together. They set up harmless cameras and small drone flights, capturing footage of the Lamborghini's comings and goings. They documented each weekend in detail, noting not just the presence of the car but how it interfered with other residents. Each picture and recording added clarity to the pattern of repeated privilege. Meanwhile, Mira remained polite but firm with neighbors and HOA staff. She understood that acting emotionally could weaken her position. Instead, she focused on fairness and transparency. Her resolve inspired some neighbors to quietly share their own frustrations. They offered small insights like times the car blocked other important areas or how it affected deliveries. By the end of the week, Mira had a full record. She reviewed it late one evening, feeling a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. The evidence was clear. The car, always appearing at her space, always leaving late, and always without consequence, formed a pattern that could not be ignored. Finally, Mira decided it was time to confront the situation more formally. She drafted a report with photos, times, and dates. She included the impact on her own life and the small inconveniences caused to other neighbors. This was not about revenge. It was about fairness, respect, and following the rules everyone agreed to. As Mira prepared to submit her report to the HOA, she felt a sense of calm determination. The problem was no longer just a blocked parking spot. It was a test of community values and fairness. She knew that with the right evidence and a patient approach, she could bring attention to the issue in a way that even Dana and Ben could not ignore. That weekend, as the Lamborghini appeared again, Mira did not approach it angrily. Instead, she observed quietly, noting the time it arrived, the angle it was parked, and the small details that added to her case. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her careful planning, patience, and intelligence were turning frustration into a strategy. Mira realized something important. The solution was not in fighting, not in confrontation, and not in anger. The solution was in human ingenuity, fairness, and persistence. She smiled to herself, imagining the day when the HOA board could no longer ignore the pattern. That day, Mira understood that she was not just claiming a parking space. She was claiming fairness, respect, and the right to live in a community where rules applied to everyone. And she was ready to use every tool she had to make sure that claim was recognized. The first step had been patience. The next step would be proof. And with proof, Mira knew, even the most privileged could not hide from accountability. The weekend arrived with a golden sunrise that spilled across the neighborhood like a promise. Mira had spent the week gathering evidence, planning every detail, and coordinating with Raul and Talia. Her resolve had grown stronger. She was no longer just frustrated. She was focused. Today was about more than a parking spot. It was about fairness, respect, and demonstrating that human ingenuity could solve problems when rules were ignored. Mira arrived at the parking lot early. Her notebook in hand and a camera slung over her shoulder, she walked slowly past the rows of parked cars, observing the subtle movements of neighbors as they began their weekend routines. Some waved to her. Others whispered quietly. A few knew exactly what she was doing and offered small smiles of encouragement. "Ready?" Raoul called from his small workshop at the edge of the lot. He held a compact device in his hand, one that could record movement and timestamps. We set this up yesterday. It will automatically log the car as it comes and goes. No one can say we are imagining this. I am ready, Mira replied. She felt a spark of anticipation. Today would mark the first step of transforming frustration into action. Talia arrived soon after, her drone neatly folded in a small backpack. I will patrol from above, she said. We can get clear footage of the parking area. We can even track how Ben parks and how long he stays. This way we have full evidence. The three of them began the quiet work of observation. Mira set up her camera near her car while Raoul activated the motion sensors. Talia lifted the drone into the air, its rotors whirring softly. The drone moved in a slow, steady pattern, capturing an aerial view of the lot. The sunlight reflected off the shiny surfaces of cars, but the lens was sharp enough to pick up even small movements. Hours passed, and Mira observed the patterns that had become familiar over the past week. The rented Lamborghini appeared just as expected, gliding into the lot with a sense of confidence. Ben, always in a relaxed, carefree mood, stepped out wearing headphones and a casual smile. He seemed oblivious to the cameras and the eyes of his neighbors. He parked the car precisely across Mira's reserved spot, leaving just enough space to make it difficult for her to park later. Mira calmly recorded the time, angle, and any minor obstructions. She was methodical, noting the arrival of Ben, the way he handled deliveries and even the small items he left around the car. Each detail was another piece of the puzzle. She knew that when she presented this evidence, it would be impossible for anyone to argue against it. As she worked, neighbors began to notice her activity. Some approached cautiously. Are you keeping track of that car again? One asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Yes, Mira replied politely. It is about fairness. This is my spot. We need to document how often it is blocked. A few nodded in understanding. The neighborhood had seen conflicts like this before. Privilege often caused frustration, but few had the courage or patience to address it with evidence rather than anger. Mira's calm approach inspired quiet respect. By midday, Mira had collected hours of footage and detailed notes. She reviewed everything on her tablet, checking timestamps and comparing angles from the drone and ground cameras. The pattern was undeniable. The Lamborghini always arrived on weekends, never moved until late evening, and consistently interfered with Mira's assigned space. Raoul joined her with a small device. This will make the evidence even stronger, he explained. It tags each photo and video with the exact location and time. Even if the HOA tries to question it, they cannot. Everything is transparent and verifiable. Mira nodded, feeling satisfaction and determination. She had prepared for weeks and the results were finally clear. But she also knew that evidence alone would not be enough. The HOA often ignored complaints until public attention forced action. She needed a plan that combined proof with visibility. Talia suggested an idea while maneuvering the drone. We could project the data publicly, she said. Not in a way that embarrasses anyone, but enough to show the board and neighbors what is happening. Transparency is key, Mira considered the suggestion. She liked the idea. A small public demonstration of patterns without confrontation or harm could make the situation undeniable. She imagined using harmless projection lights, visuals of time-lapse parking, and clear explanations of rules violations. It would be a display of fairness, ingenuity, and accountability. As the afternoon passed, Mira's attention shifted. She noticed small interactions between Ben and other neighbors. Some avoided him, wary of his confidence and Dana's influence. Others smiled politely but did not challenge him. Mira realized that by focusing on evidence and visibility, she could shift this balance. The neighborhood could see that fairness mattered, and human intelligence could correct imbalance without anger. Mira returned home briefly to organize the data. She labeled videos, annotated photos, and drafted a clear timeline. Each step was precise and detailed. She knew the importance of clarity. When the HOA received this report, there would be no question of the facts. While working, Mira reflected on her approach. Many people would react with immediate frustration or anger. Some might act without planning, causing more harm than good. But she had chosen patience and intelligence. By turning observation into strategy, she was demonstrating the human ability to solve problems through reason, creativity, and fairness. Later that evening, she met Raul and Talia at a small cafe. They reviewed the day's work together. "The data is strong," Raul said. "We have timestamps, photos, and drone footage. Every movement is recorded, and it shows the pattern clearly," Talia added. "It is not just one incident. It is consistent. The board cannot ignore this without looking bad." Mira nodded. "This is more than about a parking spot. It is about setting a standard. We need fairness in our neighborhood. Everyone should follow the rules, not just those with privilege." They spent the evening planning the next steps. Mira suggested submitting the report to the HOA, but also preparing a small, non-confrontational public demonstration to show neighbors and the board the evidence. They discussed harmless visual projections, signs explaining the patterns, and even inviting neighbors to observe without singling anyone out. The idea excited them all. It was clever, safe, and undeniable. It showed that humans could solve problems using strategy, creativity, and cooperation rather than confrontation. Mira felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, Mira returned to the parking lot. The Lamborghini was there again. Ben stepped out confident as ever, unaware of the scrutiny above him. Mira observed quietly, recording every detail with her camera and making notes. Each minor action, each slight obstruction became part of the growing record of evidence. Neighbors began to notice Mira's activity. Some waved politely. Others watched curiously from balconies. Rumors started to spread quietly. Someone was documenting patterns, gathering evidence, and preparing a demonstration. Mira smiled. The anticipation of change energized her. Human effort, fairness, and ingenuity were slowly creating impact. By afternoon, the patterns were complete. Mira reviewed the footage with Raul and Talia. Every weekend, every arrival, every minor violation was clearly documented. There was no ambiguity. The evidence spoke for itself. Mira decided to take a break, walking slowly through the neighborhood. She observed small acts of kindness between neighbors, people sharing tools, helping each other with deliveries, and greeting one another warmly. She realized that the neighborhood had potential to be more than just rules and complaints. It could be a community built on fairness, cooperation, and respect. Mira returned to her apartment, thinking about the next step. The evidence needed to be presented strategically. She wanted the board to act, but she also wanted neighbors to understand the pattern. Transparency, fairness, and ingenuity would be the pillars of her plan. Late that night, she drafted a full report. Photos were labeled clearly, drone footage was organized, and timestamps were precise. She included a narrative explaining how repeated privilege disrupted the neighborhood and why transparency mattered. She also added a plan for a small public demonstration to show patterns without confrontation or harm. As Mira reviewed the report, she felt a sense of satisfaction. The path forward was clear. With patience, intelligence, and teamwork, she could address the problem without anger or conflict. She knew the evidence was strong, and the demonstration would ensure visibility. Fairness would prevail and human creativity would solve the problem. Mira closed her laptop and leaned back, feeling calm and confident. The Lamborghini was just a symbol of privilege and disregard. By using her mind, planning carefully, and working with friends, she could turn a frustrating situation into an opportunity to showcase fairness and human ingenuity. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of the next step, presenting the evidence, gaining support, and demonstrating that rules applied to everyone. Mira smiled, knowing she was ready. Human creativity, patience, and teamwork had already turned a frustrating problem into a path forward. The weekend ended with quiet anticipation. Mira watched the neighborhood settle into evening routines. Streetlights glowed softly, neighbors chatted in small groups, and the Lamborghini waited in the lot. But Mira's mind was already planning, preparing, and the next Saturday morning arrived bright and calm. Mira felt a quiet excitement as she prepared for the first phase of her plan. The week of observation, note-taking, and evidence-gathering had prepared her for this moment. Today was not about confrontation or anger. It was about clarity, fairness, and showing everyone in the neighborhood the truth of what had been happening. She carried a small backpack containing her tablet, her camera, and a few other devices. Raul had prepared a mobile projection system, a harmless device capable of displaying clear images and text on surfaces. Talia had her drone ready, with a small screen for real-time observation and recording. Together, They were about to create a demonstration that would be impossible to ignore. As they arrived at the parking lot, Mira noticed Ben's Lamborghini already parked in her reserved spot. He stepped out of the car, smiling confidently, scrolling on his phone. The sunlight reflected off the car's polished surface, and he seemed completely unaware of the careful planning happening around him. Mira took a deep breath. "Are we ready?" she asked Raul. Raul nodded. "All set. The projection system is positioned and the sensors are ready. Talia has her drone in the air." Talia maneuvered the drone quietly above the lot, capturing the layout and making sure that all angles were covered. Mira positioned the projector in a discreet location, pointing it at the Lamborghini's windshield and the nearby pavement. The projector's images would be visible to anyone passing by, showing the exact timeline of the car's repeated presence in her spot. Mira tapped her tablet, and a soft light appeared on the Lamborghini. The projection displayed a timeline, images from the cameras, timestamps, and notes of when the car had arrived and left. Text explained the rules of the HOA and how the spot was reserved for her. The display was clear, factual, and professional, not accusatory. Neighbors began to notice the unusual projection. Some walked closer, curious about the light patterns on the car. Others looked from balconies. Slowly, a small crowd gathered, whispering among themselves. Mira remained calm, standing near the projector, observing reactions. Ben looked up, surprised. "What is this?" he asked, clearly confused. Mira smiled politely. "It is a visual record of the parking patterns. It shows how often this spot is blocked and the impact it has on neighbors. We wanted to make the information clear and easy to understand." Ben's expression changed from confusion to mild irritation. "Why are you projecting this?" he asked. "Because transparency matters," Mira said calmly. "This is about fairness. Everyone should follow the rules, and evidence makes the situation clear for everyone, including the HOA board." Dana, the HOA chair and Ben's mother, arrived soon after. She had heard about the small crowd and the projection. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice firm. Mira stepped forward. "Dana, this is a record of repeated parking in my reserve spot. We have photos, timestamps, and drone footage. We wanted to present it clearly so the board and neighbors could see the pattern." Dana glanced at the projections. She frowned slightly. "This seems public. Are you trying to embarrass someone?" Mira shook her head. "No, this is factual, transparent, and non-confrontational. It is not about punishment. It is about showing patterns and ensuring fairness. The evidence is here for everyone to see." Neighbors murmured quietly among themselves. Some nodded in agreement. Others took photos with their phones. The clarity of the presentation left little room for dispute. The crowd's interest gave weight to Mira's evidence. Human attention and observation were powerful tools in addition to technology. Talia flew the drone closer, projecting aerial images on a nearby wall. The images displayed the parking lot from above, showing exactly how the car blocked the space each weekend. Raul explained, "This shows the full view, including all arrivals and departures. Everything is logged accurately with timestamps." Mira pointed to the ground. "This small projector displays every recorded incident on the pavement. Anyone walking by can see the data clearly. It is harmless, but it communicates the truth." Ben looked around, growing increasingly uncomfortable. "This is unnecessary," he said. "I was just visiting. It is one day, one weekend. This is overreacting." Mira shook her head. "It is not just one day. This has been happening consistently. It affects neighbors, deliveries, and the smooth functioning of the community. We are demonstrating patterns, not attacking anyone personally." Dana's frown deepened. She crossed her arms, clearly annoyed at the public display. "I will need to review this. You cannot just project things like this without approval." Mira remained calm. "The goal is transparency. All evidence is documented and verifiable. It can be reviewed officially. We wanted to make the facts clear for everyone. It is not about conflict but accountability." Raul chimed in. "We used harmless technology. Nothing is damaged, nothing is illegal. It is clear and factual. It is a demonstration of fairness and human problem solving." Neighbors began to murmur in agreement. Some offered nods, expressing quiet approval. Others whispered about how often they had noticed Ben's car blocking spaces. Slowly, a sense of support for Mira grew in the crowd. Ben's confidence began to waver. He glanced at the projections, the drone footage, and the gathering neighbors. The data was undeniable. He had assumed privilege would protect him. But here, human ingenuity and transparency had created accountability that no amount of confidence could ignore. Mira turned to the crowd. This is not just about a parking spot. It is about community, fairness, and responsibility. Everyone should have equal access to shared spaces, and rules should apply to all. Some neighbors began clapping softly. Others took photos to share with the broader community. Mira knew that public attention was a powerful tool. By combining evidence, technology, and transparency, she had created a situation that encouraged fairness without confrontation or harm. Dana, realizing the impact, finally spoke. We will review this officially. I understand that you have documented the issue. We need to ensure that rules are enforced consistently. Mira smiled politely. Thank you. That is all we want. Fairness, clarity, and respect for all residents. The projection display continued for the rest of the morning. Mira, Raul, and Talia monitored the situation, ensuring everything remained professional and factual. Neighbors continued to watch and whisper, many clearly impressed by the careful planning and thoughtful presentation. By afternoon, the crowd had dispersed. Ben stayed near his car, looking down at the projections quietly. Mira approached him calmly. I hope this helps you understand the impact of blocking spaces. It is not personal. It is about fairness and rules. Ben nodded slowly, a hint of reflection in his eyes. I understand, he said. It was the first time he had acknowledged the situation without defensiveness or dismissal. Mira turned to Raul and Talia. This was successful. We presented evidence clearly, professionally, and safely. Now the HOA has no excuse to ignore the problem. Raul grinned. It is clever, fair, and undeniable. Human ingenuity wins again, Talia smiled. Sometimes the best solutions are non-confrontational but highly visible. People cannot ignore facts when presented so clearly. Mira spent the rest of the day reviewing footage and notes. She realized that the public demonstration had not only informed the HOA, but also inspired neighbors. Some approached her to ask how they could help ensure fairness in other situations. Mira felt a sense of pride. This was more than just solving a personal problem. It was setting a standard for the community. By evening, Mira returned home exhausted but satisfied. She reflected on the day. Her plan had worked precisely as she had hoped. She had used human intelligence, creativity, and patience to turn a frustrating situation into a lesson in fairness. Technology had amplified her efforts, but it was her careful thinking and dedication to principles that had made the difference. As she prepared for the next steps, Mira thought about the broader impact. The demonstration had shown neighbors and the HOA board that fairness and transparency mattered. Privilege and confidence could no longer overshadow rules and accountability. Human ingenuity and patience had proven more powerful than arrogance and disregard. That night, Mira reviewed all footage, making sure everything was saved and properly annotated. She drafted a short report to submit officially to the HOA, highlighting the evidence and the public demonstration. The presentation had already made an impression, but formal documentation ensured lasting impact. Mira smiled as she closed her laptop. Today had been about strategy, clarity, and fairness. Tomorrow would bring further steps, but the first public demonstration had been a success. Human creativity, patience, and persistence had turned a frustrating situation into a clear example of fairness in action. She looked out her window at the parking lot below. The Lamborghini remained, but now it seemed smaller, less intimidating. Human determination and careful planning had reshaped the neighborhood's understanding. Mira knew that this was only the beginning. With continued patience, evidence, and visibility, fairness would become the standard and the community would thrive. As she turned off the lights, Mira felt a sense of calm confidence. She had acted without anger, without harm, and with creativity and fairness. Human problem-solving had prevailed, and she knew that the next steps would continue this path toward a stronger, more just community. The week after Mira's public demonstration began quietly, but with a growing sense of tension in the neighborhood. People spoke in hushed tones about the clever display that had captured everyone's attention. Her evidence was no longer just photos and drone footage. It had become a shared story that neighbors discussed in hallways, on balconies, and in small groups near the parking lot. The attention made the HOA board uneasy, and Mira knew that change was approaching. Early Monday morning, Mira received a call from a board member she did not know well. "Mira, this is Thomas from the HOA board. We have reviewed the public demonstration and your submitted evidence. The board wants to meet with you to discuss the situation and how to proceed. Are you available?" "Yes," Mira replied confidently. She felt calm, knowing she had prepared thoroughly. "I am available any time." By mid-morning, Mira arrived at the HOA office. The board was present along with Dana, who looked both annoyed and uncomfortable. Ben was there as well, sitting quietly, unsure of how to respond. Mira carried her tablet neatly organized with all the footage, photos, and annotations. She had rehearsed what she would say, making sure her approach was calm, clear, and fair. "Thank you for meeting with me," Mira began. "I am here to present the evidence regarding repeated parking violations in my reserved space. This is about fairness, transparency, and ensuring the rules apply equally to all residents." She tapped her tablet, and the board viewed the timeline, drone footage, and annotated photos. Every weekend was documented. Every arrival and departure was logged. The projections and photos from the public demonstration were included, showing how the evidence had been displayed to neighbors. Thomas, a middle-aged board member with a reputation for careful judgment, spoke first. "Mira, this is very thorough. The board appreciates the effort you have put into collecting this evidence. It is clear, consistent, and verifiable. We cannot ignore this situation." Dana shifted uncomfortably. "I admit the presentation was unexpected. However, I feel it was public and may have embarrassed my son. We need to consider the consequences carefully." Mira nodded respectfully. The purpose was not to embarrass anyone. It was to demonstrate the pattern clearly and fairly. The goal is accountability and ensuring rules are followed, not punishment. Ben looked down at his hands. He had not spoken much, but Mira noticed a small shift in his expression. For the first time, he seemed to recognize that privilege alone could not protect him from consequences. Thomas continued. "Given the evidence, the board recommends that Dana recuse herself from any discussions regarding her son's actions. Additionally, the board will review guest parking privileges to ensure that assigned spaces are respected." "Mira, we appreciate the clarity of your work. It sets a standard for accountability in our community." Mira felt a quiet satisfaction. Her patience, planning, and strategic approach were making a tangible difference. "Thank you," she said. "My intention is for all residents to have equal access and for the community to operate fairly." The discussion continued as the board outlined formal steps. A review of rules was scheduled, and neighbors were invited to provide input. Mira realized that her demonstration had not only highlighted a problem, but also encouraged community participation. People who had previously been silent were now engaged, ready to contribute to solutions. After the meeting, Mira walked outside with Raul and Talia. The sun was warm and the parking lot appeared peaceful. "That went well," Raul said. "You handled it perfectly. Calm, factual, and fair. People respect that." Talia smiled. "And the community is paying attention. This will change how things are done. Transparency and fairness are now part of the conversation." Mira nodded, her mind already considering the next steps. She wanted to ensure that change was not temporary. The rules needed enforcement, but the community also needed to internalize the principle of fairness. Over the next few days, neighbors began discussing the parking situation more openly. Some expressed relief that Mira had addressed the issue professionally. Others shared their own frustrations about small inequities and suggested improvements. The conversation shifted from conflict to collaboration. The neighborhood's shared spaces had become more than just concrete and cars. They were symbols of fairness, cooperation, and respect. Ben began to show subtle changes as well. He approached Mira one afternoon while she was organizing evidence. "I want to apologize," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much it affected you and the neighbors. I see now that the rules apply to everyone and I want to follow them." Mira smiled politely. "Thank you, Ben. That is all I hoped for. Following rules and respecting others makes the community better for everyone." Dana observed from a distance, her expression a mix of pride and reflection. She realized that her position had shielded Ben for too long. Seeing Mira handle the situation with intelligence and fairness highlighted the need for transparency and ethical leadership. The HOA board began implementing changes quickly. Assigned parking spots were clearly marked and monitored. Guest privileges were reviewed to prevent repeated misuse. A digital system for reporting and tracking violations was introduced. ensuring that residents could document issues fairly and transparently. The neighborhood felt more structured yet more connected. As everyone now understood the importance of fairness, Mira continued her work quietly, monitoring the parking lot and assisting neighbors with the new reporting system. Her approach inspired others to take responsibility for maintaining order and fairness. The community slowly began to operate more smoothly, not through enforcement alone, but through shared understanding and accountability. One afternoon, Mira noticed Ben helping another neighbor move groceries from the parking lot. He smiled and spoke politely, careful not to block anyone's space. Mira felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The change was not only in rules but in behavior. Human ingenuity, patience, and transparency had influenced even those who previously relied on privilege. The digital system also allowed neighbors to submit suggestions for improvements. Some proposed small community projects like adding benches, planters, and charging stations for electric vehicles. Mira encouraged these ideas, emphasizing collaboration and shared responsibility. The neighborhood was transforming into a more considerate and proactive community, guided by fairness and human creativity. Raul visited Mira one evening with a small gift, a notebook to continue documenting community improvements. "This is for you," he said. "You showed that careful planning, intelligence, and fairness can solve real problems. The neighborhood owes you thanks." Mira accepted it gratefully. "It's not just me. It's all of us working together." Human ingenuity, fairness, and cooperation made this possible. Talia joined them, her drone quietly hovering nearby. "We have set a standard now. People will see that rules apply equally, and that problems can be solved without confrontation. That is the real victory." Mira reflected on the journey. What began as frustration over a single blocked parking spot had evolved into a broader lesson for the entire community. She had turned annoyance into strategy and strategy into positive change. Human determination, intelligence, and collaboration had created a solution that benefited everyone. As the sun set over the neighborhood, Mira walked through the parking lot, observing neighbors chatting and children playing near the edges. The Lamborghini remained, but it no longer represented privilege or disregard. It was simply another car in the lot, part of a community that now valued fairness and cooperation. Mira felt a quiet pride. She had acted with patience, intelligence, and respect. She had not sought revenge or confrontation. Instead, she had relied on evidence, transparency, and community engagement. The results spoke for themselves. That evening, Mira returned home, her mind calm and satisfied. She reviewed the digital system, ensuring that all reports were logged and visible to neighbors. She reflected on how human creativity and problem-solving had transformed a small conflict into an opportunity for positive change. The community was stronger, more fair, and more connected. Rules were now followed not only because of enforcement, but because of understanding and accountability. Mira realized that the real victory was not about winning a personal dispute. It was about demonstrating the power of human ingenuity, cooperation, and fairness to create lasting improvement. By the end of the week, the neighborhood had fully embraced the new systems. Residents submitted suggestions, shared observations, and engaged in discussions about fairness and respect. Mira's careful approach had inspired a culture of accountability, and even Dana and Ben had begun to adjust to the new expectations. Mira smiled quietly as she observed the neighborhood from her balcony. What had started as a single conflict had grown into a community-wide lesson in human intelligence and integrity. She knew that fairness, patience, and creativity would continue to guide her and the neighborhood toward a brighter future. The Lamborghini was now just another car. The lessons it represented had far-reaching effects. Mira had shown that even in small disputes, human determination and thoughtful action could transform challenges into opportunities. Humanity had prevailed, not through confrontation but through clarity, intelligence, and collaboration. The morning sun bathed the neighborhood in a soft golden glow. Mira woke feeling calm and purposeful. After weeks of observation, evidence collection, and strategic planning, the final stage of her plan was here. The Lambo had been a symbol of privilege and disregard, but now it was time for resolution, fairness, and renewal. Mira prepared her tablet and gathered her small devices. Raul was already at his workshop, testing the mobile projection system one final time. Talia adjusted her drone and checked the camera feed. Everything was ready. Today would not only demonstrate accountability, but also celebrate the power of human creativity and cooperation. The neighborhood had been buzzing for days with curiosity about the next step. Residents walked by, smiling and whispering about the clever demonstration from the previous weekend. Mira had intentionally invited no one formally, allowing the curiosity and attention to grow naturally. People were invested now, eager to see fairness applied. As Mira arrived at the parking lot, she saw Ben standing beside the Lamborghini, fidgeting with his phone. He looked nervous but polite. For the first time, he seemed aware of the impact of his actions. Mira gave a small nod of greeting. Ben returned it quietly. There was no tension, only a subtle understanding that today was about resolution, not conflict. Raoul approached Mira, holding a small device. "Everything is working perfectly," he said. "The projection system and sensors are ready. We will display the recorded patterns clearly and professionally." Talia lifted her drone, hovering silently above the parking lot. "This will show the neighborhood exactly what happened and why fairness matters," she said. "It is factual, clear, and safe." Mira took a deep breath. She tapped her tablet and the projection began. Images of the Lamborghini from previous weekends appeared on the windshield and the pavement. Timestamps, drone footage, and annotations showed the exact arrival and departure patterns. The display was clear, calm, and professional. It was not accusatory but informative. Neighbors began to notice immediately. Some leaned over balconies while others walked closer to see the display. Mira explained to anyone who asked, "This is about clarity and fairness. It shows the patterns clearly and ensures that everyone understands how assigned parking works." The board members of the HOA arrived quietly, including Dana. They watched the display, reviewing the evidence once more. Dana looked uncomfortable, but she remained composed. Mira noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. Transparency was powerful, and even influence could not hide repeated disregard for rules. Thomas, the board member who had been most supportive, spoke first. "Mira, this is thorough and clear. The demonstration makes the situation undeniable. We will enforce the rules consistently from now on." Mira smiled politely. "Thank you. My goal is fairness, clarity, and accountability for everyone, not punishment." Ben stepped forward slowly. "I want to apologize," he said quietly. "I did not realize the impact of my actions on you or the neighbors. I see now that rules apply to everyone, and I will follow them in the future." Mira nodded. "Thank you, Ben. That is all I wanted. Understanding, responsibility, and respect for neighbors are what make a community work." Dana spoke next. "We will review guest parking policies and assigned spaces. I understand that privilege should not allow rule breaking. Mira, you have set a good example of transparency and fairness. I will work to ensure the board follows through." The community watched quietly, absorbing the demonstration and the statements from both the HOA and Ben. Mira could see that the impact was real. People who had been silent or hesitant now had a clear example of fairness in action. Mira tapped her tablet again, showing suggestions for improving community systems. Raoul and Talia helped display additional ideas: benches, planters, and a neighborhood reporting system for violations. The board and neighbors discussed these ideas openly. There was a sense of collaboration and pride in building a better, fairer neighborhood. Later that afternoon, the Lambo was ready to be returned to its renter. Mira and Raoul guided the process carefully. The car had suffered no damage. The temporary immobilization used in the previous demonstration had been harmless, merely a technical measure to reinforce awareness and accountability. It was now lifted, and the car could leave without issue. Ben and Dana accompanied the return process. Ben handled the situation politely, careful to avoid any disruptions. Mira observed quietly, appreciating the change in demeanor. Privilege and arrogance had been replaced by awareness and responsibility. The community had won through fairness and human ingenuity, not conflict or revenge. Neighbors gathered around, congratulating Mira quietly. Some thanked her personally for handling the situation with intelligence and calmness. Others expressed admiration for the creativity and transparency she had demonstrated. Mira realized that her approach had inspired more than just a solution to one problem. It had encouraged a shift in community culture. By evening, the neighborhood felt transformed. Assigned parking was respected, Guest rules were clear and residents were actively participating in keeping the community fair and functional. Mira watched as families walked through the lot, children played safely, and neighbors chatted with ease. The small tensions that had existed before had dissipated. Respect, transparency, and collaboration now guided interactions. Raoul joined Mira at her apartment balcony, sipping a cup of tea. "You did more than resolve a parking dispute," he said. "You set a standard for the whole community." "That is impressive," Mira smiled. "It was not just me. It was teamwork, planning, and patience. Human ingenuity and fairness made the difference." Talia hovered her drone nearby. "We showed that solutions do not need to be aggressive or confrontational. Careful planning, evidence, and transparency can change behavior and culture. This is a human victory." Mira reflected on the journey. It had started with frustration, blocked spaces, and repeated disregard for rules. It had evolved into a strategic, patient, and creative solution. She had turned anger into planning, planning into demonstration, and demonstration into lasting change. Human intelligence, cooperation, and fairness had triumphed. The following days brought small, meaningful changes. Residents began using the new reporting system to suggest improvements, share observations, and address minor conflicts constructively. The HOA board became more attentive, ensuring rules were enforced fairly. Ben continued to follow the guidelines, showing respect for neighbors and acknowledging that privilege did not override responsibility. Mira felt a sense of satisfaction as she observed the neighborhood's progress. What had begun as a single problem had grown into a broader lesson for everyone. Fairness and human ingenuity had created lasting improvements, setting a new standard for how the community would operate in the future. The final moment of closure came when the neighborhood organized a small gathering. Neighbors brought food, children played near planters and benches, and people shared stories of community improvement. Mira stood quietly watching the scene unfold. She realized that her work had created more than fairness. It had fostered connection, pride, and mutual respect. Dana approached Mira, offering a sincere smile. "Thank you for your patience and professionalism. You have shown me the importance of transparency and accountability. I will make sure the board continues to uphold these standards." Mira nodded politely. It was important for everyone to understand that fairness applies to all. Rules matter, but so does human ingenuity in finding solutions. Ben, standing beside Dana, added, "I have learned a lot. Thank you for showing me the right way to handle responsibility and respect." Mira smiled at them both. The goal is a better community. We all benefit when fairness guides our actions. As the sun set on the neighborhood, Mira felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The Lambo was no longer a symbol of privilege or disruption. It had been a catalyst for positive change. Human creativity, collaboration, and patience had solved a problem in a way that benefited everyone. The neighborhood was now stronger, fairer, and more connected. People understood that rules applied to all, and they embraced a culture of cooperation and transparency. Mira realized that even small conflicts could be transformed into opportunities for lasting improvement through intelligence, strategy, and fairness. That evening, Mira sat quietly on her balcony observing the lot below. Cars were parked neatly, neighbors greeted one another, and children played safely. The air felt lighter, filled with shared understanding and respect. Mira smiled, knowing that human ingenuity had not only solved a problem, but had set a standard for the future. Her final reflection was simple. Fairness, creativity, patience, and collaboration could overcome privilege, frustration, and challenges. Humanity had prevailed, not through anger or confrontation, but through intelligence, planning, and clear communication. Mira turned off the lights and went to bed, content. The neighborhood had changed, and so had the people within it. A simple parking dispute had become a story of fairness, ingenuity, and the power of human cooperation. The Lambo had been returned. Ben had accepted accountability. Dana had learned the importance of transparency, and the neighborhood had embraced fairness and collaboration. The story had reached its natural conclusion, leaving the community stronger and united.